Hey everyone, and welcome back to Fashion Design with Hannah. Have you always wanted to get into knitwear design but didn't want to study it as a college major? Well, I, as a fellow non-trained knitwear designer, wanted to share the basics with you so you could get into it as well. Before we get into it, don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe if you aren't already. Now let's dive into knit. Trust me when I say learning knitwear can take a while, but it's certainly worth it if you put in the time. To start, you need to know the anatomy of a stitch. The two most basic stitches are the knit stitch and the purl stitch. The knit stitch will create a little V on the front side that is facing you, while the purl stitch will create a little bar or a bump on the side facing you. A not so secret fact is that these two stitches are really just the opposite view of the same stitch. The front view of a knit could look like a purl on the back. A great way to think of these two stitches is that a knit stitch will create dimension towards you, while a purl stitch will create dimension away from you. The knit V shape is also a really fun way to create visual pathways, like little arrows going in a certain direction. You can create so many different textures and looks just by different combinations of knits and purls. If you want to get really fancy though, you can get into cables and pointelle. Cables are sort of those like twisted looking designs. They are very common with Aran knits, and you create those by holding stitches either in the back or the front of your work and then later joining them back into your row. This is true for doing cables with both hand knitting and machine knitting. Pointelle, on the other hand, is when you create holes in the fabric. You can actually use them to create certain emphasis on different parts of a garment or make them more breathable. If you do an all-over pointelle garment, that makes it great for spring and summer. And if you use a fine gauge yarn for this, it'd be considered lace. Speaking of gauge, a lot of hand knitters will know this term and want to avoid creating a swatch of it because it's extra work. Gauge for hand knitting is checking that your yarn size and your knitting tension actually match what the pattern calls for. You check gauge by making sure that the number of wales, aka the columns or stitches that run vertically, and the number of courses, aka the rows and the stitches that run horizontally, actually match what the pattern is designed for. In the industry, it's a little bit more standardized because machine tension and yarn sizes are more controlled. You can easily identify the gauge for yarn by how many wales are in a rib trim. You can just squish them together and then count how many are in an inch, and then you have your gauge. The lower the gauge number, the thicker the yarn is because it takes less stitches to fill in a space. Therefore, the higher the gauge number, the finer the yarn is because it takes more stitches to fill in the same space. Common gauge sizes are 3 gauge, 5 gauge, 7 gauge, 10 gauge, and 12 gauge. Are there more gauge sizes? Absolutely, but those are the common ones. In order to get that gauge, you can actually apply 2 or more ends of yarn together to create a thicker yarn, but I'll get more into that funny business in a more advanced knitwear designer video. Now, the most important part of gauge is how it affects pricing as a professional designer. As I just mentioned, yarns can be applied together, but that also means that you're using more yarn, which of course means the cost goes up. Of course, the other big thing that affects cost is the content of the yarn. Man-made fibers such as polyester and acrylic are going to be a lot cheaper than nature-made fibers such as cotton and wool. Obviously, this is due to issues with different yields from different seasons and climates, along with diet and care of animals, versus just being able to manufacture exactly what you want with a man-made fiber. But cost is usually what determines what kind of yarn you use in the first place. I have been really excited to see more sustainable fibers reach the fast fashion market though, such as recycled polyester, organic cotton blends, and even just organic cotton. Other things that can affect the cost of the garment besides notions like zippers and buttons are going to be the joining methods that you use. Since true knitwear is made exactly to the shape that you need, you then look into how the pieces are joined together and finished. First and foremost, the majority of sweaters knit at the industrial level are going to be knit from the bottom up. This is especially important to remember when designing artwork and different stitch layouts. Some stitches, such as ribs and full needle, can be self-start, which means that the yarn is actually added to the machine in the exact stitch pattern from the beginning. Regular jersey or stockinette for the hand knitters can be self-start, but it curls like crazy, so a whole garment is not usually jersey with a jersey finish, but it can be used as a small trim, either at the hem, neckline, or cuffs, and then transferred into the rest of the body stitch. Most commonly though, a garment starts with a rib, either 1x1 or 2x2, and is either transferred or linked to the rest of the body. Linking is just like sewing a seam on any other garment where two pieces are attached together. However, with linking, there is no sewing machine. It is completely dedicated to linking machine. So when you need to link a garment piece to another garment piece, you actually need to take your piece off a knitting machine and go add it on to the linking machine. And of course, with another machine added, the cost goes up. A cheaper method that also looks clean is transferring, aka not taking the garment off of the knitting machine you're already on and just continuing on to the next stitch. Transferring is a lot cheaper for front neck plackets on cardigans, however the back neck will still need to be linked. Transferring may then seem like the obvious money-saving choice, however it's still useful and easier for some factories to use linking when it comes to adding in a really cinched look, like add a balloon sleeve or add a hem for a blouson effect. Knowing these small things as a designer can really help your company achieve the look that you want, but at the price that they need. If you still want to become a knitwear designer, this video is a great introduction. However, a prospective company might say that you still need to learn a little bit more. So if you would like to see more advanced knitwear designer videos, let me know in the comments down below, and I can certainly make them happen. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll be seeing you here in the next video. Bye! Go ahead and smash that like button and hit subscribe if you aren't already. Now let's get into it. Count them out. I can make them happen.